Why would a medical doctor become a health coach? That is a question I got asked so many times after my 25 years as a doctor, but that is also the question we're going to ask Dr. Carol Wilder, who's a sports medicine physician who now helps people as a coach. And we're going to look at, she's had 30 years experience as a doctor and what led her to decide on choosing health coaching to help her clients even more profoundly. So please welcome Dr. Carol Wilder. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to have a really great conversation today. We're going to have an honest look at like where were you at? What led you to do this? You know, in order to be a doctor, it takes many years and it costs a lot of money to be a doctor, and you get to the top of that game, and then what has you leave? So take us back to what led you. You can even go back to what led you to become a medical doctor, but especially what led you to become a health coach. Give us a little bit of a background about your story and what prompted this shift.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was a science nerd forever and I loved going to medical school. I'm a lifelong learner. So I actually liked that whole process and I liked helping patients, figuring out problems. But after 20 plus years in the business and becoming, an employee by corporate medicine, the love of the job definitely started to wear off. I did get into the burnout phase and decided, hey, I need to do something. And I got a career coach actually first who introduced me to coaching of all things. And I became a health and wellness coach. And I've been loving it. It's a very different way to help people. I go from 15-minute visits where I just don't get to the root problem to I've got an hour with you and we can really dive into things. So it's much more satisfying personally and as a business person, since this is a business, it's also more satisfying on a business side of things because being an employee, very different. Having someone tell you what to do. Being a health coach, I can, make my own hours, call my own shots, and it just makes life a little bit more fluid and flexible. And I'm much happier doing it this way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the general public thinks you're the doctor, you're the boss, you can do what you want. But the reality of the situation is you're working in a hospital, you're working in a clinic, you're on call, you have certain hours that you have to do. You can't just take off when you want to, or
Right.
sometimes at all ever. and and there is burnout, and usually there's not enough hours in the day to be able to do the work that you wanted to do. So many of my colleagues, we went into medical school. We really want to help people be healthy. And then you just get like beat up and abused through the whole system. Like so many sleepless nights, like on call, like 72, 36-hour shifts. Like it's ridiculous. Not eating for many, many hours and not sleeping and not seeing family and not being there, for the special events and the anniversaries. And I remember missing my son. He got athlete of the year and I wasn't there. I'm at work. And so you sacrifice a lot, and I remember feeling like, and if people got healthy, it would be worth it. If people actually got amazing results, all right, it was worth the sacrifice. But
Right.
it ended up being like I was seeing people being pinballed back and forth from test to test and specialist to specialist before eventually, like, nothing more that we could do for you. And I knew, and that's not satisfying. And I knew that a lot of what I was seeing could have been preventable with a healthy lifestyle. And so, like, if we could have just got out ahead of it, if we didn't have to keep to those like short 15-minute visits and stuff, if we could have got into root cause, even way back years ago, I'm like, if we could get to the core of this, none of this other expensive, painful suffering needed to happen. But like in the system, it was really hard to do that. And so you're there as a sports medicine doc, you're burnt out, and you're looking at, okay, a career coach who, so a career coach is a coach as well. So that's really
Yeah,
cool. And that's probably unusual for a medical doctor. And like usually like we were the ones who people said, huh, lucky them, they knew what they wanted to be when they grew up. And here
right,
we
right.
are, right? And so like people switch it around. So tell us a little bit about because then there's generic health coaching, which, well, that'll keep people broke and not making a difference. Tell us a little bit about what had you lean into the particular type of health coaching you have now. You had a personal story that kind of was overlaid at the same around the same time. So
Right.
professionally being burnt out, but then personally going, wait a minute, what's going on? Why is this happening to me? So tell us a little bit about that personal story you had.
Yeah, I'm glad you have to ask that question because when I got my health and wellness coaching degree, I really didn't know what niche I was going to have. And then when my late 40s, again, around the time I was burning out, I've been a lifelong athlete and I was biking to work. I was in Seattle, so I was one of those cool bike commuters, and I was just tired all the time. And I thought, okay, eventually I'll get in better shape and this will go away. But it didn't. It got worse and worse, and my joints hurt, and I'd sleep for hours and hours on the weekend trying to recuperate. And I was gaining weight. I was gaining belly fat. And I thought, what is going on? And then it took me years to figure this out. And I'm a doctor.
Yeah,
Duh. It took me a long time to figure out I was in perimenopause and then menopause.
yeah,
And it took me even longer to realize, hey, we can do something about this.
yeah,
It's not just hormone replacements. It's not just, you know, this is the way it is. Get your baggy shirts out because you're now in midlife.
yeah,
You can actually change your lifestyle. You can start eating more protein, cut back on carbs, start lifting weights, and change how you work out, and also change your stress level, your rest amount, which ties into my burnout, your mindset, all of that kind of just collided together. And I finally started, making those changes, and I started getting stronger, having more energy, losing body fat. And I was on a mission to help other women because in medicine, we just don't go there with women. And so,
yeah.
with coaching and my personal experience, that's what opened my door to really being motivated to help people through this.
How quickly did you go from being exhausted and you're tired? And were you still working as a doctor at this point, or were you?
I was still a physician, but I had
Yeah,
been cutting down my hours already. But it took me years to figure out what was going on with me. But
yeah,
once I figured it out, and made those changes within 3 months, I was seeing changes. 4 months, 5 months, every month has, and then it's sustainable as well. So once I figured out the nuances and the lifestyle changes, it didn't take too long. But the mindset shifts definitely helped sustain those lifestyle changes.
yeah. And then, okay, so you've got this personal experience of when I've changed these lifestyle, a holistic, 360 revamp here, I'm getting a whole different life as a
Yeah,
result, and it's better, and it finally worked. And the other thing I love about your story is like you were doing everything right. You're like an athlete, and
yeah,
you're an athlete. You're exercising. It wasn't like, oh, I just, you were doing things right, and then it's like, wait a minute, what was working before in my 20s, 30s, now in
right.
my 40s and up, like it's not cutting it quite anymore. And I know like all women will go through that. I did as well. Is like, wait a minute, my plan is no longer working. And so we have to adjust it. And so I think a lot of women fall into that. Who do you help now through your coaching practice? Who is it that you're passionate about helping?
People who are suffering the same types of in the same situation, active midlife women who are, getting that belly fat, and they're joints are achy and maybe their energy's low. I want to help them get that vitality back, get that strength back, start to lean out and get back to not who they used to be, but this awesome midlife woman that they can
Yeah.
be, you know?
Yeah.
So that's who I really am passionate about helping.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you have both the personal and the professional background to back that up. And now, when we look at helping this person, midlife woman who's struggling with joint pain and belly fat and energy and all of that, and helping her. Now, when we look at, having your coaching hat on or your doctor hat on, let's just take a look at the differences in what you're able to do. Because I found as a doctor, as someone who was a doctor, I had a lot more freedom as a coach. And I could help people so much more. And there might be other health coaches who were in the medical profession before or are in it, or they might be contemplating a career change as well because of the burnout. And they might want a little bit more information about, okay, what's the difference between the two? It's a question I get from doctors all the time. Like, what is
Uh-huh.
the difference? And so would you say, how are you able to help this woman as a coach where you might not have been able to do that, or where they might not be able to get that from the medical system per se?
Well, as a medical doctor, I mean, time is always limited, right?
Yeah.
So I'm the expert. I come in, make the diagnosis, and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then the patient says, yes, doctor. And no, I don't really do that that bad. But that's the general way we
Yeah, that's
practice
all you have
medicine,
time
right?
for. Yeah.
And that's all you have time for. So as
Yeah.
a coach, I'm coaching. I'm trying to help them come up with the reasons that, that they might have these problems and help them kind of figure it out, without telling them what to do, because motivation has to come from within and change has to come from within. So helping them elicit that that real deep feeling, or why this is happening, and why they want to get better is the big one, and what's
Yeah.
keeping them from getting better, what are their obstacles, and that's how I'm going to help them, coach them to get to be that person that they really want to be. And the other thing I see frequently is especially midlife women, active midlife women, they may come in and see me when I was a primary care physician, for example, that, their lab work is fine, their blood pressure is fine. And then I say, you're doing great. And then as a coach, they come and see me and they said, my doctor said all this stuff is really good, but I don't feel like myself. I'm
Yeah.
dragging on in my workouts. What's with this belly fat? Is this just the way I am now? And I think society says, yep, that's the way you are. And, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think a lot of women feel shame about wanting more. And I'm passionate about trying to change that narrative. I think
Mhm.
as coaches, we can help them say, it's okay to want to look better, to want to feel better,
Yeah.
to be able to, participate in your sports at a
Hmm.
at a better level.
Hmm.
So all of that's okay. And so that's a long-winded answer to your question of how this is different, but it is different. You can get into a much deeper conversation with them and help them more long term.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And it's not like one's right or wrong. Like, if your
Yeah,
heart stops, put the paddle to me. Like,
right.
let's do that. But like, if it is, a lot of what people are struggling with is chronic lifestyle, and traditional medicine, excellent in an acute crisis. But if we could do more on the chronic lifestyle, preventative, proactive approach, we would have more resources to devote to those acute accidents and things that happen where traditional medicine really shines. Um, and yeah, like in the quick, fast-paced thing, the doctors have about enough time to say, here's your GLP-1, or or what used to be like, go lose weight, and that's it. But how do you do that? If they haven't figured out how to do it so far, they're probably not going to be able to figure it out. And so being able to getting to the root cause, and a lot of times stress is at the root of that. And so without addressing the stress, they're going to have inflammation, and sooner or later that's going to come, and that patient's going to have to pay the price. Like, sooner or later, that bill's going to be paid for less kicking it down the road. And so here you can really like walk them through that in a really nice way, customize it to them. And so definitely the client definitely wins in this result. And that's what so many health coaches just love, the ability to be a part of that. I always say it's one thing when I got results for my health, but it's a whole other thing to help someone else. It feels even so much better. And now that I help health coaches with their business, it's one thing for me to create a six-figure health coach business, so much better to help, other health coaches. It just feels so much better to be able to help someone else with something that maybe that you struggled with, and to lighten their load. And so the client patient benefits. How about you in terms of what's the benefit, or what do you like best about coaching practice per se?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I was just going to add to what I had just said on a career side of things. You spend so much time in medical school and historically you ran your own practice, and now that's kind of a thing of the past. And so being an employee and being told what to do, a lot of us, that rubs us wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
you're just a well-paid cog in the wheel, basically. And it's time for money, time for money, time for money. And after being in practice for 30 years, I'm like, I have a lot to give. I have a lot
Yeah.
of knowledge. I have a lot to offer people. And I don't feel my light went out. I don't feel like I'm doing it in medical practice. So, being able to have your own business and run things the way you want to run it, and also scale. If I can reach a bigger audience, I'm helping that many more people, and it can be financially rewarding, which is okay too.
Yeah.
And so that just makes me feel like I'm growing as a business person and in my career. So that feels good to be able to reach more people.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think it is an ability to, as you say, expand your reach, live life in your terms, get to work with who you want, when you want, how you want, where you want.
Right.
Like as a doctor, we kind of got to take them where, even if they don't want help and we don't want to help them, we still got to help them. And whereas it's so much more enjoyable as a
Right.
coach. And so, yeah, so many benefits. I really feel like it is the best career path possible. I really think it's so tremendous and has so much potential. However, now here's the downside. Let's get real and talk about the downside. So there are some downsides, and the biggest is so as a doctor, we're not entrepreneurs. For most practices, we're not really entrepreneurs, and I certainly wasn't in my radiology practice. And when we go into coaching, we're wanting to help people on this deeper level. And most health coaches are like me. When I switched, I thought I just went more holistic and take more time with people, talk more about nutrition. I didn't know I'd just become an entrepreneur and a business owner. And I had no idea about anything there. And although I knew how to help people, I had medical background coaching, but I knew how to help people, but I didn't know anything about how to structure a business. And so that I learned the hard way. 10 years, 100 grand, trying to figure it out, did figure it out. And then that's now what we focus on at the Health Professional Academy. So when you came to the Health Professional Academy, what was one thing that you might have been struggling with trying to figure out, you know, um, before you came to us, that you were looking for help with?
Well, at the time I was going through a divorce, I was having some major lifestyle changes, and I wanted, and I'm not a spring chicken. I wanted things to happen quickly, and I didn't want us to drag out for years and years. I was reading stuff online, and I bought an asynchronous course on how to start a coaching program, and I knew in my gut that I just needed to deep dive and go all in and have someone help me with all the tech and how to market, and do I need a website? Do I not need a website? I
Yeah.
knew that I didn't know all that stuff, and I knew that it wasn't probably the wisest thing to try to figure it all out if I was really wanting this to happen in a timely manner, because my goal was to replace my position salary with coaching salary.
Yeah, and there's so many pieces to running a business. And then people
Yeah.
might really know their field of medicine, but the whole business aspect is like a whole other piece that most health coaches, and unfortunately, most health coaches don't have any paying clients out there. And that's why I'm dedicating this channel and this podcast to help people. And if you guys have questions, pop them in the chat. I am here to serve. I will create videos to answer your questions. But people know enough, and yet they can't attract the clients. They don't know how exactly to set it up. And so that's what we are aim to do, aim to please in terms of setting up the infrastructure, so the scaffolding, so that you guys can, you bring the heart, we bring the system, so that you can have that purpose driven business of your dreams. Because you're right, that time with marketing funnels, and now all of a sudden you're an influencer, or you're an IT person, or any number of other roles that you never wanted to do. Yeah, just wanted to coach. And so it really helps to know that. And so there are some core things that you will want to know. And one of those is like carving out a niche. For example, as a doctor, you don't necessarily need to have a niche. Most of us niche down. I was a radiologist, ultrasound radiologist. You were a sports medicine physician. We tend to niche down anyways, but it's especially important as a health coach to really have a narrow niche. And so that's step one. If you're like, how do I create my practice? And that can be hard to figure out. And so I'm going to give anyone who's listening a free copy of my book, Six Figure Health Coach. There'll be a link down below. So get that. That starts to talk about carving out that niche and some of those steps that you require, because we don't know. Well, we don't know. Okay, so now you've got this practice now where you're helping these women that are struggling in midlife with their energy and their joint pain and their stubborn belly fat.
Right.
Why do you think so many women struggle with this? I'm going to say the vast majority of women in midlife have low energy, excess weight. Like, it's the majority, not the minority. Why are so many people struggling? What are some of the myths? What are they mixing up that's keeping them trapped and stuck here?
Well, first of all, being a physician, I know that it's not talked about very much in medical school. And, I've even talked to gynecologists who don't learn about menopause and definitely don't learn about the earlier signs in perimenopause. So
Mhm.
that's one of the problems. It's not necessarily a myth, but it's definitely a problem that it is leading to lack of awareness by a lot of people, including me, a physician.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing that I think is a problem is just society says, oh, you're middle aged, so welcome to the club. You're going to have weight gain and low energy. That's just the way it is. And we're kind of dismissed. And so I think kind of questioning or pushing back on that societal norm is going to be helpful. And I think it is happening now that
Mhm.
we're learning more and more. In the 80s, we used to always, and not necessarily physicians, but women, we used to just exercise more, eat less. And that was
Yeah.
the answer to everything. And that worked in your 20s, 30s, early 40s. But
Yeah.
once you're
Yeah.
40s, 50s, it just backfires. So
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know that you really have to kind of change your lifestyle. So I think those are the biggest things that is I think lack of awareness is probably the biggest problem why so many people are suffering and they just don't know that you can do things about it. Hormone replacement, whole other story, that can be helpful, but lifestyle, that's not talked about in the medical world or just in the everyday world. It's
Yeah.
changing though.
Yeah, no, you're so true. And there is a trend. It's a slow trend. I remember when I was a health coach and picking out my niche, and I was premenopausal at that point in time. And honestly, even though I was a medical doctor, like menopausal women scared me because like I knew I didn't know
uh,
what I didn't know. Like, I know I'm not going to be like, oh, I know how to deal with your menopause because I haven't do it. Now, having been now postmenopausal, I'm like, I got it, but beforehand, no. And I think you're right. It wasn't taught well there. Potentially, maybe that's changing now, but it's a slow one. And there's too much of a quick lever over into quick fixes. And the thing that I learned personally in that realm, when I was going through menopause, I had an interesting lab experiment for myself because I was working in Calgary in a clinic. Busy, busy, busy clinic all day. Go, 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 go. You got this patient in here, got this patient here. This one's got to go to ICU, da, 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 like that. And then, but I lived in Kelowna, BC, Canada. And so I would fly to work. And so it was an unusual thing. So I was a doctor in one location on one day of the week, and on another day of the same week or the next week, I would be a health coach in a different location. Same
Hmm.
age, same diet, really the same diet because it's the same me, and it was night and day. I only got hot flashes when I was working as a doctor. And when I was working
Interesting.
as a health coach, no. So the stress was number one because everything else, I had my own case study from myself in two different things. It was a unique situation. So stress is huge, and a lot
Yeah,
of women in midlife are stressed.
right.
They're going through they're in a sandwich generation. They're caring for older parents and kids, or they're going through divorces or any of these or job situations. They're right knee deep, eyeballs deep in the thick of it right there. And I think not all countries struggle with menopause. And if you look at some countries where, or historically, many years ago, where maybe women were not working, we're not saying not to work, but where they weren't like stressed like crazy, like that.
Yeah.
When they were in that environment, they didn't have some of the symptoms that we have now. And so really getting to the root cause, and I know you're like a champion for getting to root cause. Um, how have you grown as a health coach through, helping others? What have you learned from others or about yourself becoming a health coach? Because it really is, you know, your business grows to the extent that you do. And so what are some things that you've learned that you've loved about becoming a health coach, and anything that you'd say to your former self as you're looking back and saying like, we can, because when we know better, we can do better. So anything that you would say to your former self?
Well, I mean, so I went through three stages where I was coached by a career coach who was also a doctor. And then I became a coach, and now I coach. So through all of it, you kind of learn a lot of techniques, but a lot of the biggest ones that changed me personally were just mindset and how your outlook on life and positive psychology and gratitude. It changed how I look at things, and and now it affects how I coach. It made me a happier person, and it made me, move in the direction that I'm moving now, which is positive.
Yeah.
So what would I say to my older self? I was kind of in a typical type A doctor fixed mindset. You're on this doctor route, you're burned out, that's too bad, tough it out. And I would say to that person, nothing's fixed. You don't
Mhm.
have to stay on that same route. And you can get off that track, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just because society says you're a doctor, you have to stay a doctor, that's the life you chose. You don't have to stay that if you're not happy. And
Yeah.
so that would be my advice to myself is, how do you feel? And I don't feel that great, and I don't like what I'm doing right now, and listening to that person.
I think that it is huge, and I think as we get older, we learn to kind of go in.
Yeah,
Hopefully, we do learn to
yeah,
like trust ourselves and our own intuition, and not bow and bend to what other people have already set for us, because you can't
right.
please enough people. And I think women in particular tend to be more people pleasing by nature, and so we want to make others happy, so we'll just kind of stay in line. And especially, as doctors, well, we were academically very good in school, and so part of that was you did a good job. You got the
Yay,
A,
yeah.
all good for you. And so we're used to going for the gold star and that thing. And so, but then all of a sudden, it's important to take a pause and go, wait a minute, is this what I want to do? And I remember, and it's hard because we spent like years and maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to where we are at the top pinnacle of our career. And to say, never mind is kind of a big deal. And so it's a
Yeah.
big choice. And the great thing is, the wonderful thing about coaching is you don't have to be cold turkey. Like, it is something that you can build. As I don't recommend people like just like quitting and then starting. You're going to add more stress to your system. You're going to throw your menopause into
Yeah, right.
overdrive. We want to just, you can phase it down. Like, keep this or keep this existing if it works, while we build our little escape route. Take our life. I'm envisioning a little spoon in the prison wall, trying,
Yeah.
trying to dig a path to freedom. But you can slowly or quickly create a path. But if you're going to do that, that's where what I needed to do is I had to throw out the business model that everybody else is teaching out there for health coaches, where they're trading time for money, this many dollars for this many hours or sessions. You won't be able to leave a medical practice from there. I've tried it every which way, upside down and sideways. You will burn out. And
Uh-huh.
however, when we focus on results, excellent results for your clients, that's what we teach, that's what we deliver, that's what you guys do for your clients. That's the secret hack. And having a business model that is not dependent on your hours, but is dependent on delivering excellent results for your clients. That's the game changer. So that's a little secret sauce that a lot of people miss in that. And so you always want to look at who is your ideal client, and then how can you get them excellent results. And then that feels good. So it's not an all or none. You can gradually bring create something for yourself, and it's worth it. I mean, it is the freedom to be able to work with who you want, when you want, how you want. I mean, that's a core value for me, and I think for most health coaches, and I think a lot of doctors, we kind of thought that we would be the boss.
Yeah. Totally.
I mean,
Right.
we were head of the class, and we kind of thought, well, then if we're head of the class, we get to call the shots. And sort of a little bit, but you're kind of squeezed, and you don't really have freedom to work with who you want, when you want, how you want, where you want. And as soon as you quit, your income is zero.
Right.
And you're like,
Yes,
now
exactly.
what? Now what do I do? And so we want to be, and yet there's still so much to offer and to give. And so, like, how can we create and work smarter, not harder? And so it's worth, yes, you can do it. It's worth going after, but you want to do it smartly, as you are doing. And it's just so rewarding. So there's monetary rewards, but then what I call soul satisfying rewards, when you help people on this deeper level that I could never help people with. I got thanks and paid extremely well for what I did, and people but the level of transformation that you can deliver when you're working with someone closely as a coach is profound. And just as an example, because there's spin-off, instead of side effects, there's spin-off benefits. Share an example or two of someone that you worked with where they came to you for one thing, for help with this, but then these other things also got better. Give us one or two examples.
Yeah, I had a client who was about my age, midlife, same kind of problems. She's just getting heavier and feeling kind of bad about herself. She was exercising, but she was doing the wrong stuff, and she was, addicted to sugar, and would crash in the afternoon and all that kind of thing. So what started as, can you help me, Carol, with, weight loss and get me a exercise routine and help me get my energy back? We definitely did that with, some lifestyle changes, how to, change it up with more protein, kind of decrease the carbs, no added sugar, some of those types of things, and add some weightlifting rather than just all the aerobic stuff she was doing. So she definitely lost weight. She actually lost 20 pounds, but she also, had a body composition scale reading where she gained muscle. But more than that, more than that, the transformation in how she felt about herself, she just kind of had a, swagger, and people were noticing that she was smiling more. And she was in a not so happy relationship with her husband, and just feeling better and more empowered. She was finally able to say, you know what, I'm not happy. She got a divorce, you know, several months later, she met a great guy. And so she's just a different woman, and she has a happier life. So it's more than just, weight loss and strength, which has huge health benefits. It's just the transformation of making you into a more empowered person.
It really is. And so it's not just like, yeah, she lost 20 pounds or whatever, but it's not just that. And so that's the difference with coaching. And so once you've experienced it, either as a coach or as a client, like once you've seen it, you're not going back, right? As opposed to, with a medication, a weight loss medication, well, maybe you'll lose weight, but that does nothing for your stress. It does nothing for your skin. It does nothing for your muscle. In fact, it goes the opposite way. And it doesn't do anything for your relationship. But
Nice.
when you become that next level, better version of yourself, that's who you attract. And like everything gets better. I love that example. Any others that you want to share?
Yeah, I had another client who wasn't coming to me for weight loss and strength training or muscle gain, all those types of things that I my niche is. Her main concern was her anxiety, and she admitted she treated her anxiety with cigarettes and alcohol. And rather than doing the typical doctor thing of saying, well, you need to stop smoking, it's bad for your health, and you need to cut back on your drinking,
Yeah.
we all know that that's like easier said than done.
Yeah.
We took a big step back and just looked at what's going on in her life and why does she reach for the cigarette? And, it's a lot of stress in her life. She's getting her master's, and she had relationship issues. She had a lot going on in her life, and the stress was really kind of the trigger. So once we were able to kind of dig deeper into what was triggering it, what other things she could do for relieving stress and relaxation. It was transformational what happened to her. It was over the holidays, so I didn't see her for 3 weeks or something. And by the time she came back, she had taken a week off. She quit smoking. She was cutting back on drinking. But it was another transformation. It actually shocked me. I thought, oh my gosh, she's a different person. She went from feeling, well, I don't really care, so to being someone who said, I quit smoking, and she was just lighter and hopeful. And so
That's
that was
no.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really phenomenal. I love those stories, and it's so satisfying and it's rewarding, and it allows you to repurpose your skill set. You have a tremendous skill set. You spoke at one of our recent events, where we have subject matter experts, and you were talking about muscle building. We were talking about the importance of that and for longevity, and you were diving into the science and talking about, so these studies here, but they were all done on men, these studies, and we're trying to apply them to women. And you're just such a wealth of information. And people definitely should connect with you and find out more about what you do, how you help people, the phenomenal results that you deliver. How can people get in touch with you, Carol?
Well, my website is Dr. Carol Coaching, and I'm at Wilder Sports Doc is my handle on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. So drcarolcoaching.com. So DrCarol coaching.com. And on Instagram, it's Wilder Sport Doc on Instagram and Facebook. So
Yeah.
definitely check her out. And I want to thank you for sharing all of this. It was an amazing, look into this. If you are a health coach or thinking about health coaching and wondering what are the 5 steps that I need to do to get my practice up and running, what are the components I need? I've got this video here for you. And and definitely pop in the comments. What did you like? What questions do you have? And we're here to answer them. And with that, have a fantastic week. Thank you very much, Carol.
Thank you.
Be good for you.